The New York State Office of Addiction Services and Support, or OASAS, provides this podcast as a public service. Thoughts and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent or reflect those of the agency or state. This is Addiction, the Next Step.
Hey there, everybody. This is Jerry Gretzinger, your host for Addiction, the Next Step, the podcast that's brought to you by OASAS, the Office of Addiction Services and Supports for the great state of New York. So today's episode, we really love to be able to talk about so many different topics and certainly different things that can impact those that we serve, folks who are seeking the services of OASAS. And one of those things that is so important is housing. People need to have affordable and reliable housing, especially those who are in treatment and then getting into recovery so that they can be on their own feet and kind of, put their lives together in that way. And housing is so important and often can be a barrier to someone's success. But we do have people who are helping to bring those barriers down. And one of those groups is Concern Housing. And in the New York City area, their Associate Executive Director is James Mutton. And James joins us now. Thanks so much for sitting down with us today.
Good to be here.
So, James, first let me ask you this. Jim, James, you have a preference?
Jim is great.
Jim. All right, Jim, that works. So let me get into this first. We talk about housing and how important that is. If you don't mind, let's start with the background for Concern Housing, kind of where this started, when, what prompted it to be what it is.
So Concern Housing has actually been around for 52 years. We started as a very grassroots agency out in Suffolk County. There was an old state psychiatric center out there in Central Islip that had closed down, and a bunch of former patients and family members basically got together and asked themselves, what do we need? And the big issue was obviously housing. And we formed a nonprofit agency. Back then it was very small scale. We were renting 1 and 2 family homes, suburban homes, and it's gone on to be a pretty huge nonprofit agency that still to this day focuses on providing supportive housing, permanent supportive housing to folks, as well as affordable housing opportunities to individuals and families. So we are now all over Brooklyn and the Bronx, in New York City, and also Nassau and Suffolk. And I would say we serve over 1,800 folks in a variety of settings, from those small 1 and 2 family homes to much larger buildings with hundreds of units.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at your website and seeing some of that information, and it's concernhousing.org, right? If anybody wants to do the same thing I did, take a look. And what a great story. 52 years ago, started renting a couple of apartments to help people out, and it has really grown so significantly. I know one of the things I looked at was on Coney Island, and it's a whole structure, and it's got multiple units, and it's just one of so many now that Concern Housing is responsible for.
Yeah, Coney Island was a very special project to us back in 2019. It was our first single site project with 2 different state agencies. So we work with OASAS and the Office of Mental Health, basically to create permanent housing. We have 135 apartments there, and 82 of which are serving formerly homeless veterans, recovering from mental health and substance use challenges. So folks have their own studio apartment in a building with a kitchen and a bathroom. And we've got staff 7 days a week, 24 hours a day there to provide support. So it's really filled a niche for many homeless veterans who were unnecessarily in the shelter system or on the streets. And alongside those, we've got 53 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. So there are a variety of household sizes, families, and kids living in that building. And it's transformed Coney Island. I mean, when we were initially there was not a lot of development going on. There was a lot of vacant lots, empty land. People were skeptical. about a supportive housing program in their neighborhood. And we've really changed the viewpoint. When we had our grand opening back in 2019, we had a city councilman at the time came over, and he admitted he was a skeptic. He wasn't sure. He was supportive of a project like this. And once he saw what we were doing, the beautiful place to live that we were able to provide and the voices of the folks living there, he came out and said, this is the model of supportive housing for New York State. I want every project to look like this and to operate like this. So it was a magical moment.
And what you're saying there is just such a tremendous part of this whole story, because a lot of what we want to be able to do is to be able to show people the good things that are happening, the good things we want to continue to do. And by doing that, address the skeptics who are like, well, we see a lot of NIMBYism, right? Well, not in my backyard. Right. It's not going to work here. It has to be somewhere else. But you're right. As soon as people see, because, we could talk to them, but sometimes they need to see it with their own eyes and experience it to really understand it. So it's terrific that by doing that, you were able to show people what you had in mind, and that they were converted to going, yeah, you know what? I can get behind this. That's great.
That's it. And, we invite anyone to come to our sites and see the space, meet the tenants, really hear firsthand from the people living in these buildings. We recently opened a bagel shop in a commercial space in the same building. So we're now running a bagel business as well as providing housing. And, a number of veterans are working there in the shop. It's open 7 days a week, Cyclone Bagels. So if you're in Coney Island, stop by on 21st and Surf and grab a bagel and let us know what you think.
And aptly named Cyclone Bagels for Coney Island. That's perfect. So what I want to do too is now I want to get into sort of how the connection with OASAS came about, because, I've always been working towards the housing end of things, but then my understanding is that staff were encountering some situations where substance use disorder was involved, and it made them realize, we need to expand what we're providing here to address this as well. Let me have you take that part of the story.
Yeah, so for years we've been working with folks with mental health diagnoses, trying to get people into recovery, back to work, really reconnecting to the communities. And we found that we were also serving folks with substance use challenges, that there were comorbid issues going on. And we really couldn't do our job just focusing on mental health. We had to recognize that, recovery was holistic, that people were at different stages of change in their addiction, and we needed to gear up and provide those supports. We saw a lot of challenges with the opioid epidemic, which, really came fully into flow with the COVID shutdown and the pandemic. We were finding that there were a lot of folks who were using substances, and, in our case, it's in their own homes for the most part. They're in their apartments, they're with the door shut, they may be alone. And sadly, we were losing people to that epidemic. And I have to say, when we provide 24-hour staffing in a building, usually it's that direct care counselor, case manager that has the unfortunate discovery of finding somebody deceased. And the trauma that comes with that, right? When we're talking about working with folks, developing therapeutic relationships, for some cases in years, to find somebody dead in their apartment of an overdose, there's nothing worse. And we're taking that vicarious trauma home with us as a result. So we realized, we had to get into a process of harm reduction. We had to focus on overdose prevention. We had to have tenants talking to tenants about that process. We could not do it alone as just staff to tenants. We had to involve the folks with lived experience there. So we've really done a lot of work as an agency, focusing on what's needed. And, that obviously includes Narcan. It includes fentanyl test strips. People, thinking about what they're doing before they do it, not using alone. But we've also spent a lot of time working on a curriculum which is tenant-based. So we're involved in some studies right now which is focused on tenants, peers talking to other peers about substance use and how they can be involved in perhaps overdose prevention. So, everything from having a buddy system, a safety network, not using alone,
Yep.
Really checking up on people all the time, and that's made a difference. I have to say, we've gone from losing, multiple people in a year to virtually no one now. And we're building a system that is there for people, that, shows that there's caring, that there's connection at any time of the day, any day of the week.
And, I can tell you the things that you're saying here is really, it's music to the ears of a lot of people in our building here at OASAS, because you talk about harm reduction, you talk about, peer-to-peer, connections, people with lived experience being involved. All of it so important. And certainly you touched on harm reduction, something that we are so promoting right now because of the difference it can make. So let's kind of put through a scenario, right? If people want to know, well, how does the process work? Well, how does somebody first make contact with concern? How do they make that first communication to say, I could really benefit from the services you provide? And then take it a step further. If it is someone with substance use disorder, how does that process continue to evolve so that they're receiving all these things that we've just been talking about?
Yeah. So, we may get a referral from a shelter or a street outreach team, working with a homeless person with substance use challenges. We will connect those folks with our team on site, and we'll take a referral typically through the city's Human Resources Administration. They have a single point of access now for referrals. But we're also meeting people in the community. We'll meet neighbors, we'll meet community members at community board meetings, and they'll say, I've got somebody sleeping on my doorstep. What can you do? Or I know a veteran who has been, just on the beach, on the boardwalk for a period of time. So we'll get out there and we'll engage folks ourselves. We'll do our own outreach if necessary, connect people to the right resources. The minute that we can get someone to set a foot in the door and possibly be on the journey to permanent supportive housing, we've made that breakthrough. And, it starts at intake. It starts with that outreach and that relationship building. But the point that we're giving people a key and a lease to their own apartment, that to me, that is the most humbling part of our work. I like to say it's the day I see grown men cry when I give them the keys to their apartment. And, we have a team that is there for them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that discussion is happening when they're ready, whenever they want to have that conversation. Yep. And, it could be something as simple as a safety plan. I'm worried about relapse. What do I do if I get those urges to use? Who do I call? Who do I talk to? Or if I am using, how I can do that safely and avoid a tragedy,
Reduce harm.
So, yeah. And going back to what we talked about with peers in the building, it's typically getting people connected to other tenants who've had that lived experience, who can help orientate people to the community, that can show them the ropes, that can, be available to people at all hours of the day.
Yeah.
That our job is 90% listening, right? It's giving somebody a warm and empathetic ear to allow them to feel heard, perhaps for the first time in many years. That's the breakthrough, I think.
Yeah. And, you talk about seeing a grown person cry when you hand over the keys. I think we all obviously know how important housing is, and we hear so much more of it now. And, OASAS is doing as much as it can to kind of provide, recovery housing and housing for people to be able to kind of get back on their feet. But I think, like you said, when somebody has that roof over their head and they have a place to call home, you give them the keys, but it gives them hope. And I think that's something that just makes them realize, okay, I can do this. I've got the tools and the support system that you obviously are building around them to make them successful.
That's right. And, I think that the housing sector has done a lot of work to bridge those gaps with the treatment community, right? These are novel programs. I mean, the Surfet's Place Veterans Program was the first of its kind in New York City to be a ground up project, where it's a typical apartment building, right? Where we've got supportive housing, affordable housing, families and kids, working folks all living under one roof. It's like, well, how can we bring the treatment supports to that community? So we spent a lot of time, reaching out to those clinics, those Article 31 clinics, those harm reduction programs in the community to say, hey, we've got an opportunity here to partner with you and, bring your services to us, as well as obviously provide housing to anyone that you feel may be in need.
Well, Jim, I mean, I think what you're doing is tremendous. And I just want to say, you talked about the lawmaker who was at that ribbon cutting and said, this is the model. I'm totally behind this now. And I hope others will hear this, will hear about how this works, and that it will be a model for other programs people can follow, provide this throughout the state of New York, because certainly housing is a need everywhere. And, people with substance use disorder or any other needs, whether they be mental health or substance use, housing is so critical. So we completely applaud what you're doing, what you've been doing, and thank you so much for sitting down with us today to give us some background on it. And now I hope that you'll also let people know, where can they find it? We talked about the web address. Is that the perfect place to start?
Absolutely. A great place to go, concernhousing.org. And you can see all of our programs there, learn all about our services. You can apply for housing there. You can apply for employment. It's a one-stop shop. So concernhousing.org is our website. And feel free to connect with me there. All of our contact information is available at that site.
Great. Jim, thanks so much for sitting down with us today.
My pleasure, Jerry.
And listen, if you're looking for other services or supports that you think could be helpful to you, that OASAS could help connect you with, you know how to find us. It's our website, oasas.ny.gov, oasas.ny.gov. And, of course, don't forget our Hope line, 877-8-HOPE-NY. There's people there to talk with you, regardless of the need about addiction, whether it's substance use or problem gambling, 24/7. Give them a call. Get online. We're here to help, and we're here every step of the way. We're OASAS, Office of Addiction Services and Supports. I'm your host, Jerry Gretzinger. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, be well.